Facebook too. Still on the double devices, you know, like a rock star. Super professional. So professional. Ooh, there we go. Okay. Live over on Facebook too. What do you know? So much livey live. Look at that. Yeah, like a super profesh on 2 devices. Amazing. Amazing. So professional. Hey. So, my name is Dr. Shannon Coates. As you may be able to hear in my voice, I am on the other side of COVID. So, still a little bit snotty, but very much feeling much better, much better, which is great. But like I said, my little bit still in my voice. And today I am coming to you live. My name is Dr. Shannon Coates. You are watching on either Voice and the Art of Teaching on Voice and the Art of Teaching on Facebook, or you're watching it on my VoicePed channel on Instagram. Hopefully it's not too boomy in my new office. I have blankets everywhere until I get some more furniture in here. So hopefully it's not too boomy, and that the sound is relatively understandable. Hopefully you can understand. Fingers crossed. And I develop resources and classes and courses primarily for independent voice teachers. The next thing that's coming up is the Vocal Instrument 101 Live, and that's at the end of April. So information about that is on my website, of course. And I'm here today with some live office hours. We're going to talk about breathing a little bit. And first, just let you know that I'm here north of Toronto on the traditional lands of the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, the Mississauga, and the Wendat-Wendat peoples. So that is, I am grateful to acknowledge the original keepers of this land, the current and future keepers of this land, and grateful to have the opportunity to be on this land, to work and live on this beautiful land. So today, like I said, we are talking about breathing, and again, hopefully it's not too boomy in here. We're talking about breathing and talking a little bit about the idea of teaching breathing as one of the fundamentals of singing. So when you look at voice pedagogy textbooks, when you take a course like mine, there are lots of different courses out there that you can take on the physiology, the anatomy and physiology of the voice. One of the foundational blocks or the modes that you will take within that you will likely take is around respiration or breathing for singing. We generally tend to sort of divide up the voice or divide up the anatomy and physiology into respiration or breathing for singing, phonation or what's happening in the larynx, and then resonance. Sometimes you'll hear it called resonation, and that makes me crazy, but I think it's actually a word now. But I think it's a word now because people have been using it, and now I'm like, but is it really a word? Anyway. Resonance, for me, resonance. So we divide the vocal anatomy and physiology into these kind of 3 sections, and sometimes we have articulation in there as well. So respiration or breathing for singing becomes this kind of separate part of how we learn about the vocal instrument and how we learn about anatomy and physiology. Which is terrific. We do this very intentionally. We divide the instrument down into sort of little parts so that we can understand how things function, and that's terrific. And at the same time, it tends to give us this idea that breathing is almost a separate thing from the whole, and that we have this necessity to teach breathing for singing as a separate skill or technical skill, if you will, as part of singing. And part of that, I think, this is just like, I don't have an research here. This is just my thought. part of that is because the coordination that we require to, especially for Western classical styles, the coordination that's required for Western classical styles is so specific because we're not amplified. And there's a very specific tonal outcome requirement for classical styles, for Western classical styles. And so there's a very specific pressurization, flow, use of the breath required for I'm in my new office, which is right beside a bathroom, and someone's having a shower. So hopefully that flow isn't hopefully that flow isn't like too distracting. Amazing. I have to remember that for future lives. Nobody in a shower. Anywho, so the requirements for how we use the breath is so specific in Western classical singing. And if we don't use the breath in a really specific way, then we will likely not be able to coordinate to create the tonal outcomes that are required. And kind of what has happened then through our pedagogy is, and as we have developed pedagogy, is we've done these external observations of what singers are doing, Western classical singers are doing with their bodies as they coordinate and as they breathe and as they coordinate that breath and the release of the breath to create that tonal outcome. So we've done these kind of external observations and we said, okay, so here, and we've made this kind of like checklist of all of the things that we have observed externally in Western classical singers, and then we've kind of codified that. And then, because, Western classical, we've decided that that's the best way to breathe for all the styles. All of the tonal outcomes require you to breathe in this, like, you got to check off all these things, right? We've codified this thing for all of the styles. And it's just not true, right? It's just not true. So we run into problems. And then what happens too as Western, especially for those of us who are independent voice teachers who have had a Western classical training, often what happens then is we bring this necessity for a very specific checklist around breathing. We bring that checklist into our independent voice studios and we apply it to all the styles for all of the singers in front of us, including, by the way, we apply it to children and growing teenagers and to aging singers or mature singers. So we apply it to all of the bodies we see in front of us, regardless of whether or not it's physiologically possible, say, for example, a 7-year-old child to have a really released and swung out rib cage. It's not actually physiologically possible in many cases because of the way that the rib cage is structured, the way the torso is structured in a child, in a post-pubertal child. So we expect then this big checklist of things that we have learned in our Western classical singing, or that we've learned from someone who was trained in Western classical styles and who hasn't kind of thought through these things. We expect this kind of checklist of things that we should be observing in the singers in front of us, and we apply that to all of the singers that we work with, or who we work with, regardless of whether it might apply. So we put this big old checklist, and some of the things that we look for in singers, especially if we've had that Western classical training or we've been trained by someone who had Western classical training, some of the things we look for are, we look for a silent inhalation, because that indicates that we've got an open throat, let's say it that way, an open throat. We look for an expansion in the rib cage on inhalation. We look for a kind of like steadiness on exhalation, or an extended noble posture, if you will. We look for we look for a buoyancy in the ribs and in the torso, and we often will also look for some kind of expansion below the belly button. So we'll look for expansion basically in the torso. Often we may even look for expansion around the back, and we look for all of these kind of signs that the inhalation is correct, according to this checklist that we have acquired from our Western classical training. And I'm not here to say that those things are wrong. Don't get me wrong. Those things are all wonderful, or can be wonderful aspects of a very efficient inhalation that is going to then support and feed the exhalation or the singing or the phonation part. So don't get me wrong, it's not that we shouldn't look for those things. It's that when we apply those things across the board to all singers of all types, and all body types, and all ages, and stages of development, when we apply those requirements, that checklist, to singers in a specific, you must breathe in this way, or you must have an inhalation that looks exactly like this, we can run into problems because that is an external putting down or an external imposing of what we believe breathing to be or to look like onto folks who haven't had a chance to find their coordination for themselves yet. So that's the first reason that I don't specifically teach breathing for singing, or I don't tend to, not in the way that we have been taught to teach breathing for singing, right? So that's the first reason. I don't do breathing for singing exercises in the lesson 95% of the time. I'm going to talk about a few exceptions or caveats at the end. But that's the first reason, because I do not want to impose my ideas around what the right kind of breathing looks like for you. I don't want to impose my ideas on you. I want you to discover them yourself. The second reason I don't do specifically breathing exercises in the studio is because if we're just working on breathing, we're just working on breathing. We're not working on breathing for singing. Breathing exercises, in order to be useful for singing, must be joined to phonation. They must be. Otherwise, I'm just doing a grounding exercise or a focusing exercise. And those are terrific and have a wonderful place in the studio and in performing and in singing. Grounding exercises, breathing exercises, all very, very useful and wonderful for singing and for performing. However, if I'm looking specifically to work on breathing for a specific tonal outcome, for singing a specific phrase, for encouraging better breath control. I've got lots of quotes here, but I'll throw out the singerese and put lots of quotes around it. But if I'm working on breath management, if I'm working on even breath support, which support, not my favorite word, but whatever. If I'm working on all of those things that I really associate breathing with singing, then I've got to work on breathing with singing. Otherwise, I'm just teaching my brain how to breathe. I'm not teaching my brain, or I'm not teaching my body how to breathe for singing. If it's not attached to phonation, it's not going to be for phonation. It's going to be for, like I said, maybe focusing, maybe grounding. It'll maybe teach some of the mechanics of like what's possible in my breathing, what's possible in my voice. It might be terrific for some release if I pair breathing with movement or some kinds of stretches. That's all good and wonderful, but it's not breathing for singing until we associate it specifically with the phonation or the tonal outcome that we're looking for. The third reason I don't teach breathing for singing, I don't teach breathing per se in the way that we might traditionally think about it in the voice studio, is because as soon as we focus on breathing itself, this is very similar to the second point, by the way, but as soon as we focus on breathing itself, we lose the coordination for the outcome. Because then all we're thinking about is the breathing part. And again, breathing for singing has to have an outcome in singing. It can't just be for breathing for its own sake. We're all breathing just fine. The issue with breathing for singing is that we're not able to like coordinate the breathing we need for singing. If I just practice singing on my own, and if all I'm thinking about is how am I breathing, what am I doing, is my inhalation big enough, Did I release my, did I release my abs? Do I have are my shoulders low? Did I have a silent inhalation? If that's the main thing I'm thinking about, I'm not thinking about the outcome and how I'm using this breath. So as soon as I focus on the breathing part, I actually lose the reason for the breathing. So what we want to actually focus on, so let me give three caveats to that, and then talk about another thing as well. So let me give three caveats to that. One is that I think it is very important for voice teachers to really understand the anatomy and physiology of breathing and respiration. I do think that is very important. The reason I think that's really important is because not so that we know exactly what's going to happen in the singer in front of us, and not so that we can direct how to breathe, but so that we have an idea of what the possibilities are. Because there are 1,001, as many people as there are out there, as many singers as there are, that's how many breathing methods there are. All of our bodies are totally different. Our muscular structure, our tonal outcome requirements, our flow requirements, our pressurization requirements, our energy requirements for what we're singing, even in the moment, from moment to moment, even within myself, that's different. All of these things are unique to each singer. My body makeup, how much, whether I've got a womb or not, that's the other thing too. A lot of our voice ped understandings, a lot of our sort of formal understandings around breathing for singing and what should happen in the body are based on observations of tenors. Okay, tenors tend to not have wombs, first of all. And also, if we think about the physiology of your sort of average tenor, lots of stereotypes about to come out of my mouth now, you're welcome. We're talking about someone who has a barrel for a body and legs this long, right? The breathing that is going to support that voice and that is going to feed that voice is gonna look different than the breathing that is gonna support someone who's 6'3" and has and is all legs and has no torso or has zero torso, or someone who's 5 feet and has this much torso and teeny torso. Those breathing, the external look of breathing is going to be different from body to body and for required tonal outcomes and for styles. So, oh gosh, look, I will not restart Windows right now. Thank you. Let's restart later, shall we? Oh my gosh. All of the notifications now. Anyway, so hey, where was I? Oh yes, so what happens is we get these kind of weird mismappings of what breathing is and what the body should be doing. And we get these kind of weird mismappings also because we take what a teacher tells us and we translate it through our own sensations. And then we try to put those sensations back onto the student that we're working with or who we're working with, right? So we have these lots of mismapping and lots of kind of weird ideas about what breathing should be and what it should look like. I think it's terrific to take an anatomy and physiology course around respiration, around all the things, but around respiration, just to understand, okay, here are the physiological options. Here are all of the options for breathing. And here are all the possibilities for what this could look like in the body. And oh, that doesn't actually line up with what I thought was happening, but that's okay, now I know. And so we get, rather than, I always say, well, we want to take anatomy and physiology courses specifically around breathing because that's what we're talking about today, but we want to take those courses not because we want to learn the one true way, but because we want to learn what the possibilities are for coordination. We want to know what the actual physiological possibilities are and where those possibilities don't and do line up with what we already think and with how what we're already considering possibilities. So then when we're in the voice studio, we're looking for possibility rather than whether it's correct, right? So that's the one caveat there is around breathing exercises that I think we need to do some, anatomy and physiology. It doesn't have to be intense. You can, read the chapter in Malda's book. I'm looking around because it's around here somewhere in my office. I don't know where it is, but it's somewhere around here. There it is. What every singer needs to know about the body. You can read that chapter. I mean, it's not a long chapter. It's not super intense. It's not super dense, but that will give you some idea of the possibilities around breathing. And then you can compare those to what you have in your head already, and then you're looking for opportunity and possibility in the singer rather than looking for what's right or wrong. So that's one caveat around breathing and learning about breathing and breathing exercises. The second caveat is that when you're working with brand new learners, there may be opportunities for a breathing exercise where you're working on, oh, thank you. Oh, yes. No worries. The replay will be up, so you can watch the beginning. There are likely opportunities to work with singers around just discovering what is possible in their own body, right? So you may do breathing exercises that are separate from phonation as a discovery exercise rather than as this is how we're going to learn how to breathe, right? So you may want to do some like stretchy exercises. Missy, I love that. Yeah. Missy says, quotable, when we're in the voice studio, we're looking for possibilities, not for whether or not it's correct. Yes, I so firmly believe that. And I think we so often get stuck in the right or wrong or the correct or not correct mindset, right? And we lose the possibilities. Okay. So there may be an opportunity there. There may be a very good reason with a brand new learner or a young learner to do exercises that are specific to what is possible in your body in terms of breathing. Like how far can your ribs swing out when you inhale? How silent can the inhalation be when you inhale? What happens when you inhale through your nose versus through your mouth? Well, all of those kinds of exercises are exploratory for finding what's possible in your body. And then of course we want to also then connect those into phonation and discover what works, what of those possibilities that we've just discovered in our breathing exercises are now possible and useful and make for your most efficient tonal outcomes. How do those explorations now support your desired tonal outcomes? So, and they're also then same thing on the other side of that coin, folks who have had a lot of, who've done a lot of work and or who have, been in choirs their whole lives or, have sung and maybe have heard a lot of information around breathing for singing. So the other side of that coin are the folks who are perhaps new learners as well, but who may then have sort of ingrained ideas around what is correct and what is right. And so with those learners, again, there may be, there's likely a case to be made for having some specific breathing exercises where we just explore. Yeah, Erin, yeah, exactly. So possibility versus right or wrong. So we have those exercises in place to explore rather than to teach you how to breathe for singing, right? So these exercises aren't there to make you a better breather for singing and to teach you the correct way to breathe for singing. They're there to find the possibilities. Find all the ways that your specific body can coordinate in order to create your tonal outcomes, your desired tonal outcomes. So those are kind of my caveats, if you will. And then let's also just talk a little bit about the fact that, are there any breathing techniques that are widely taught that may actually be harmful or that are outdated? That's a good question. I'm not sure that there's anything that's widely, harmful, or that's that is actually harmful. I'm not sure that there's anything that's harmful per se. I think, and I don't think that there's anything that is, as far as I know, that is like super outdated. I think it's our ideas around it that's outdated, right? I think that I'm not sure that there's any sort of method or, I don't think that there's anything else. I think it's just our ideas around it, where we're like, okay, let's do, this breathing exercise, and so then that's gonna teach you how to do this, that's going to teach you how to have better breath control. Or let's do hoo, 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 hoo. Sorry, no phonation. And that's going to teach you how to release and inhale better. Well, not really until you join that to phonation. So it will teach you how to have a more coordinated onset, possibly, if you put the onset in. And so it's in the application, and it's in the philosophy behind why we're teaching the exercise or why we're teaching an idea around breathing. I think the most harmful thing is just the harm that we cause when we say things like, this is the correct way and this is not the correct way. I think that's the most harmful thing, and I'm not sure that that's not specific to breathing, right? Yeah, I find that I have many students who come from choir or other instructors that focus solely on breath support. Yes. So then, exactly, because then you're totally welcome. And so then those students are actually all twisted up in their breathing. Exactly. It always, when I have a new student in the studio who comes in and they say to me, the thing I really want to work on is my breathing, because, I don't know, I can't get through this phrase, or I can't blah, 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 like all of that stuff. That says to me, somewhere along the line, somebody has told you that you must, I'll talk about that in a second, you must breathe in a very specific way, and the reason that you aren't, able to sing through the phrase, you aren't able to do your agility, you can't like belt, blah, 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 like all of these things, is because you're not doing the breathing right. And that's the harm, right? Because then all you're focusing on is how do I breathe? But like, that's not the thing. The thing is, so let's talk about what the thing is in just a minute. Let me, growing up being an opera singer, I heard people debate whether or not when you sing you want to have resistance in the body, preventing your abdominal cavity pushed out versus letting it gradually come in. I know, right? So there is an ongoing debate, and that is still a debate. It's still a debate in many pedagogical circles around especially when I'm singing for Western classical styles, when I inhale, whether I should have, like I should still be like, like really engaged, or whether I should be, whether I should see a gradual release in. And there's also a little bit of a debate around like whether I should be like pushing down, whether I should feel like I'm pushing up, should I feel like I'm like, should I feel like I'm actually like engaging those muscles as I sing? Like there are debates around. Why are there big debates around this? Because we take what it feels like to us, or we take what someone else has observed in another singer and we codify it for other singers. Dude, that is not good. That's not good pedagogy. It's just not good pedagogy. So what is, and let me also say, a hybrid, yes, exactly, but gradually come out back in, but don't collapse. I mean, there are some things that we know are not useful overall, especially for Western classical singing. So if you are singing in a Western classical style and you collapse as soon as you have an onset or at the end of phrases, it's probable that collapse is related to, is going to show up in the tonal outcome as losing pitch, perhaps not having the same robustness, perhaps not having, like there are things that it's possible that will turn into in the tonal outcome. But is the tonal outcome because you didn't do something here? Or is this just the outcome of you not doing something else somewhere else? So this is the problem when we isolate breath as the thing that's causing the thing. This system is far too complex for the breath to be the only thing, right? So, and also when I say to you, this is the way you must do it, that may not be the way you must do it in your body. May not be at all. Here's the other thing. When we are trained as Western classical singers, or we trained with someone who was a Western classical singer, when I inhale, when I think of inhaling for breathing for singing, when I think of inhaling to sing an aria, I have an ingrained, well-trained response to that inhalation that includes raising, opening, releasing. Like did you hear what I just did with my voice? Yeah, so when I inhale, like I inhaled for singing, and my trained response to that inhalation is a Western classical shaping, vocal tract shaping, a higher soft palate, if you will, like more likely a wide soft palate, an open throat sensation. I'm training for it opening across the ribs. I'm training, those are the things that are entrained into my inhalation because I have done a lot of training as a Western classical singer. And that's perfectly fine, except recognize that that is the thing. I cannot tell you how many Western classically trained singers and voice teachers I have worked with who, in order for them, and they're like, I can't sing, I can't belt, I can't get my belt going, and I can't get my chest voice going. Why? Because you are inhaling for a Western classical tonal outcome. So you can't do that because you are trained. Your whole body is going to coordinate to create a Western classical tonal outcome. And your whole body is coordinating to create a flow phonation rather than a slightly more pressurized phonation, which is what's required in most of our contemporary styles, right? So your whole body is training for like, so then I'm going to inhale that way and I'm going to be like, like I'm just going to basically sound like a bad tenor when I try to belt. Why? Because I've still got that flow going. I've got the wrong coordination right from the outset. So we have to retrain that. So that is, again, that's something to really consider if you have been trained in Western classical styles and or you were trained by someone who was trained in Western classical styles, because it is entirely possible that what you're passing on to our contemporary singers or the contemporary singers you work with, and it's entirely possible that one of the reasons that you're not able to access belt as easily as you would like to, or conversational styles as easily as you would like to, is because every time you inhale, and what you're teaching the contemporary singers you work with to do is to have a classical setup every time you inhale. Dude, no. But we don't realize it, right? It's so entrained in us. And we don't realize, oh, wait a minute. Every time I inhale, I'm like, and so then I try to have a conversational tonal outcome, or I try to have a belt sound, or I try to do something other than that flow phonation, and my body ain't having it because my body has been really well trained. So we need to just be intentional and make that explicit in our minds. Oh yeah, that's right. I was trained for this breathing exercise that I'm, or the breathing that I'm doing right now is actually working against me a little bit if I want this other kind of tonal outcome. So another reason that I don't teach breathing exercises is because I am very, very much interested in singers finding what works for them and what supports their desired tonal outcomes on their own, without me imposing what it's supposed to be like on them, right? I'm very, very interested in that. So what does that mean in terms of how do we work on breathing then, right? Like, how are we not going to work on breathing in a lesson? It means that breathing becomes the we bring attention to the breathing and what we're doing in the breathing after we have created the tonal outcomes that we want. So we work toward tonal outcomes within an emotional or a motivated way, within a motivate, like, what do I want to say, right? So we work on, what am I communicating? What do I want to say? What kind of tonal outcomes do I want to have in order to communicate or say this thing? And then we back engineer with the singer, not us saying, oh, it looks like what you're doing to create that tonal outcome is you are X, Y, and Z. We say, hey, what did your body do? How did your body organize? What do you notice? What do you observe about your torso? What do you observe about your inhalation when you got that tonal outcome you were looking for, or when you communicated in the way you wanted to? What do you observe? And then they tell you stuff. And then if they say something like, well, it really felt like my knee was super connected to my elbow, and then I somehow had like, a breath coming up through the floor, then we say, well, that's amazing. Let's figure out, physiologically, obviously, that's not what's happening. But, right? We don't say like, we just say, okay, that's what your sensation is. Terrific. Let's build on that. And if we need to tweak a little bit, if we need to say like, then it becomes exploration. What happens? How does your body coordinate? If you try, a little bit of like movement in the body while you're doing that inhalation. Let's just try a little bit of movement, and let's just see whether the coordination is there to create this to create that sound a little bit more easily. So rather than tweaking like, silent inhalation. So here's another thing, right? When we're working in most popular music styles, the impetus on the singing, the reason I'm singing is to communicate. That's the reason I'm singing. So almost anything I want to do with my voice is fine, so long as I am communicating the way I want to communicate. And as I've talked about before, there's not really a healthy or unhealthy, there's sustainable or not sustainable, and you get to make a choice, right? So almost anything I do with my voice is fine. And we're really more in the realm of, like, if you can't get through a phrase that you want to get through, let's figure out not how to breathe better or take a deeper breath or anything along those lines. Let's not figure it out from the front end. Let's figure it out from the back end. You're not able to get through this phrase in a way that you want to. Tell me the phrase. What are you trying to say here? What's the communication requirement here? What are you saying just before? What's the emotional level? How much energy are you putting into this phrase? Is it possible to put a little less energy in while still having the same communication? Is it possible to put more energy in? Is it possible to up the emotion slightly? So maybe you're slightly sad. Can you be slightly mad too? Like, what are all of the ways we're going to address this phrase from your communication, your desired communication standpoint, rather than from front end, let's fix your breathing. In our Western classical styles, we are almost always fixing things from the front end. You can't get through that long phrase. Okay, let's fix your breathing. Let's do breathing exercises. But we can do this in Western classical singing too. Let's figure out what you want to say. Let's figure out where are the places where you can increase energy or decrease energy because of what you're saying. Let's learn this from the back to the front. Let's do a lot of listening to people who are doing this in a way that sounds easy. So my body learns and my brain learns, oh, this is actually easy, right? Because I'm listening to someone else. I'm not like, I'm not like only taking the information from my body, where I almost died that, 3 times when I tried to sing that long run and, Rejoice or whatever. So these are all philosophies around teaching again, that we tend to take out of our Western classical teaching styles and the philosophy around Western classical teaching, where and academia and just Western education in general. Frankly, this is more about Western education, where the Western education where we teach front end. So we teach the thing that we want to correct first, rather than understanding what the outcome is, right? Rather than saying, what's the outcome and how can I work from the outcome and come back? We use the same voice we talk with to sing with. Yes, when we're sad, our breathing doesn't mimic the same breath we have when we're happy. Yes, so there might be a little bit of difference behind that as well. And yes, interpreting musical line and the emotions behind it, by the time we are, if we're able to work from that, what am I trying to communicate? And then how does my body coordinate to create, to communicate in this way? And noticing how my body coordinates, and then making that the thing, rather than fixing it from the front, right? Rather than taking on the perceived issue. The breathing will coordinate itself if you can find the motivation. So again, this is more about like our teaching philosophy, where we're like, okay, let's fix the root problem, but the issue with that is that the root problem will coordinate it on its own. It will coordinate itself. Your body will figure it out if you can motivate, if you can figure out that end, if you can figure out how to find the motivation, or find that reason to communicate. And if you can ask those right questions, and if you can find not right questions, but if you can stay curious and find the questions, and if you can stay finding possibilities, right? So if you're able to stay in this, what are the possibilities here? If you're able to stay in the curious mode, and if you're able to stay with that focus on what is that final coordination, what is that final communication, what am I trying to say? If you're able to stay in that mode, the body will find a way to coordinate for you. Absolutely will. Ask any choir singer, any untrained choir singer. The body will find a way to coordinate for you, 100%, and then it eliminates tension. Exactly. So like if you're finding a way to coordinate without, it's very challenging to sort of naturally coordinate just through listening for Western classical singing, because of how specific the coordination requirement is, right? We do need, the majority of us need someone to kind of make sure that we're on the right track, and make sure that our bodies are, doing the coordination, and kind of, make sure things are going the way they need to go. But there's a reason why lots and lots of pop singers don't ever take voice lessons, or they might just take some coaching, right? They don't take like real specific voice lessons. There's a reason for that, because the body will find a way to coordinate what you want it to coordinate for. Absolutely. If you've got something important to say and you want to find a way to say it, the body will figure it out for you. It's very, very smart. It's very joined to your brain, apparently, is what they say. So when we're in voice lessons, what we're doing is we're working to find ways to coordinate, and to find efficiency in coordination, and find ways to allow for that coordination to happen in the most efficient way possible for our required tonal outcomes, and to give options and to give possibilities, rather than to impose the right way. So that's why I don't teach breathing, sort of like in a traditional sense in the voice studio. Simply because it's way more fun and a lot more useful to figure out, to find the body's coordination. Yeah, and like one other caveat here, or one other idea to consider, is that when we are working with well-trained singers, so folks who have had a lot of training, and there are some, technical challenges there. Something to consider, like around breathing, something to consider is to work with someone, a body movement specialist, someone like Sarah Whitten. I've mentioned lots of those folks before. Sarah Whitten, David Wilson is out in, where Where are you, David? Are you in Alberta? I can't remember now. Somewhere in the west in Canada, here in Canada. Who else is out there? There are somatic body workers. So like finding folks who are going to work with that internal coordination of the body, which is then going to release some of those held patterns. That is part of the problem when we are training, is that sometimes, again, the body will find a way to coordinate. And sometimes those coordination patterns are not useful, right? So if we've got coordination patterns that are not useful, that are holding us back, it's very challenging to come to the other side of those without perhaps an intervention, especially if you're working with well-trained singers. So without having sort of an outside intervention of someone who is like a body work specialist, that can be very useful in the voice studio for folks who have some of those coordinations that are not useful. But that those coordinations often can be challenging to change. I think there's, Lynn Helding's book has some timelines on that actually, on like you can learn something new, like a new motor coordination, you can learn it in like 3 hours or something, or maybe even a shorter time, but to unlearn a motor coordination takes like, I don't know, like days and days, and maybe even months. I can't remember now what but she literally has like timelines on it. There's been research done on how long it takes to learn a body coordination, how long it takes to unlearn. So this is important stuff that we're working with in the voice studio, right? This is important that we're not imposing a specific kind of coordination on a singer. It's really important that we're allowing singers to find the coordination that works for them within a supported environment, right? That's super important, because then otherwise, I mean, we've all had students come into the studio, maybe we haven't all had. I've worked with lots of singers whose previous coordinations are in, that's what's in their way. It isn't that they're, they don't know how to breathe or whatever. It's that their previous coordination pattern is so ingrained and is getting in their way. And so then again, often I will send those folks to a movement specialist, because I'm like, you need someone who's going to work real specifically on this. I'm gonna like do lots of exploratory stuff, but that's not gonna get you there. The same way as someone who is really specific about working in those those body things. So, all right, yeah, muscle memory. Muscle memory is a thing, yeah, and that's really what we're trying to do in singing, right? We're trying to create these muscle memories. We're trying to create this beautiful, efficient coordination, and the more we direct folks to do something, the more possibility there is for an inefficient coordination to come through for that body. And the more we support folks as they explore and find coordinations for themselves, the more possibility there is for an efficient coordination to come through, something that works really well for their body. Okay, that's enough of that for today. My voice is also a little bit tired, so still not all the way through this COVID thing, but anywho. Oh, good. That's your imposter syndrome. I love it. Yeah, I love it. I'm glad. Yeah, I'll tell you what. I haven't been like specifically teaching breathing for quite a long time, but then like, folks like Ken Bozeman, and I mean, I've talked about it a little bit, but then like folks like Ken Bozeman and thanks so much, and like Heidi Moss, like folks like that who are like, yeah, oh good, I'm so glad that you loved it. Yeah, terrific. There's a whole like years worth of of lives that you can look at on replays if you're interested. Anyway, so like folks like that, like I literally, I think it was just last week that I did, I was in a journal club. Heidi Moss has a journal club, which is highly recommended if you're a little bit of a geek like I am. And we were talking about breathing in the journal club, and she's going through like the neuroscience behind like why she doesn't teach breathing, and I'm like, this is so affirming, this is so validating. Yes, it's not just because like it seems to work better. It's because, which is like sort of my anecdotally, I'm like, I think this is a better way to teach, and I also, this is philosophically, like pedagogically, philosophically, this is a better way to teach for me, rather than, like supporting folks as they discover, rather than like imposing, right? So philosophically, it's better for me. But like, she's like, and here's all the science. And I'm like, yes, this is validating, man. So yes, also helps with my imposter syndrome. Just feels good to be like, yeah, this is not a bad thing. Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, there's a reason I joined a journal club, right? Like I wouldn't read the journals on my own. So I don't read these articles on my own. I only read them because I'm in a journal club. Yeah, but the science is there. Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So a lot of the things I think that, if we're examining our philosophy toward teaching, and we're examining so many of the things that we, intuitively do for examining that philosophy, a lot of the things that we come to, I think, intuitively and anecdotally, a lot of those things, when you start to look at the neuroscience, you're like, oh, there's a good reason for this. Look at that. Woohoo! So yeah, it's terrific. Okay, that's enough for now. Take good care. Have a great weekend. Happy Easter or Passover if you celebrate. Take good care. Ending, and then let's end over here. Take care, Facebook friends. See you later. Maybe. Oh, end.